you go into like a fascist Discord, and these are f***ing degenerates. They have anime profile pictures, and they're just like, they're complete f***ing degenerates. And you don't have any conservative authenticity there whatsoever. Femboys are with swastikas is very common among the alt. I don't even know what it's called anymore. The alt-right, whatever the it is. You have to understand there's an excess there that conservatism on its own cannot address. So what I'm really trying to tell you guys is that we need to address that excess. We need to address that extra thing, which is, I think, technological modernity, right? I think that's what it represents. It represents this kind of futurism, this excess alienation of technological modernity that doesn't allow us to return to our comfortable, cozy kind of conservative, norms that we're familiar with. There's something alienating about the changes that are happening. And one of the ways we cope with that alienation is by kind of like turning this immediate authenticity of conservative life into some form of like image. We turn it into an image that we have a fantasy of. And then all of a sudden you have furry conservatives. And all of a sudden you have like all of these weird degenerates who get in on it, because you can't just be the thing. You can't just be a normal person who has a family and has these kinds of like basic norms of family values, traditional gender norms, I don't know, like traditional sexual norms, whatever, traditional aesthetic more, So that's, I think, what the importance of the cutting edge is. And I think that's confused a lot of people. I think a lot of people look at me when I'm talking about how communism is inherently conservative, and it's like the dialectical aspect of that gets lost on them, right? And they're making it seem like I'm trying to say like, oh, well, communism. No, that's not what I'm saying. Keep in mind the dialectic part of this. And it's kind of like this structure Dugin calls archaeo-modernity. It's this archaeo-modern structure where the conservative aspect isn't because I'm trying to project this fantasy of some wholesome, comfortable, and familiar thing. I'm trying to point out how the tragedy is that when we let our wildest excesses loose of imagining the future and having this kind of alienation, we run into some kind of imminent dialectical contradiction. And it's the reference of that contradiction that is the object of traditionalism and conservatism, not in the sense of the schools of thought of traditionalism like Julius Evola and all those kind of people, but just like the basic conservatism you have in non-Western countries, or even in among conservative people in the West itself to a certain extent, right? But when you enter that kind of excess, which we have to deal with somehow, when you mirror that conservatism with some kind of artificial and imaginary form of replicating it, you end up with it like a astute opposite, right? When you try to, so let me put it this way, right? It sounds kind of like schizo what I'm saying. It sounds really schizo, right? So I'm going to really simplify it for you, okay? So we begin with our normal family life. We begin with our everyday kind of sense of what's familiar and what's normal. And then we're faced with some kind of alienation that separates us from this immediacy, right? So then the thing you want to do is return to the immediacy, right? Well, how? How do you return to that immediacy? I do want to return to that. There is something true about the original thing we lost, the original human social bonds we lost, the original family life that we lost, right? All that kind of stuff. I agree. But you can't just pretend like the alienation didn't just happen. It needs to be addressed somehow. And if you don't address it, this is what's going to happen. So you begin with your immediate family life, and then the alienation comes in. And then all of a sudden, you have no way of representing that original thing you used to have, normal family life, except through the very medium of that same alienation. It's like we can't even represent the traditional past without using the internet anymore. We have to use YouTube videos and the internet and make movies and have these online Discord communities and all that kind of shit. And then, we just kind of wink, and then on the side, what? There's degeneracy and furries. I mean, I think, where I'm coming from here is that I am way more ultra-conservative than the right. I'm way more traditional and ultra-conservative than the right wing. I am genuinely, like, for example, I think a lot of right-wingers will say some like, anime and furries are degenerate, but they're only degenerate because they don't conform to my image of what a good family is. It's just all superficial images. And that's why on the side, no matter how much you call it degenerate, you're still partaking in it. It's like there's like this pathological need to have an anime profile picture. And there's just this need to be tempted by the furry and all these degen, femboy, whatever the I'm a Stalinist. You know what a Stalinist means? It's not about the image. We are fundamentally traditional. We're not just replicating an image of tradition. We are arriving at the essence of what normal human norms are through the full exhaustion of technological and cultural modernity. We are going to fully embrace modernity. We're going to fully embrace that alienation. And from there, we are going to arrive at the basic limit upon which we define ourselves as human. That's where you're going to get basic human norms from. Not from some idealized image that's comfortable and makes you feel warm and makes you kind of feel like you're hugging your mom again or some right? We gotta be men here, right? And I feel like a lot of conservatism is just man-child. You know what I mean? Being a man means going through it, not retreating, not trying to react to it, going through it. That's what Marx was saying about capitalist modernity. We got this capitalist modernity that's on the horizon, and it's wiping everything out. What do? Are we just going to sit there and go, no, I'm going to protect my teddy bear. Don't touch my teddy bear, capitalism. No, we're going to say, we're going through it. We're going through it. You know what that means? In this degen internet with all that OnlyFans and all that sick, what if we're looking at the wrong culprit? What if instead of saying like, oh, the problem is technology, the problem is the internet, the problem is these new social networks that change the way we're interacting, what if it's the opposite? What if it's the fact that we're idealizing the past too much? What if when we embrace the full power of the internet, when we embrace this digital age, when we embrace this fourth industrial revolution, when we embrace a real great reset, what if then the real power of the DJ will be wiped away? What if when we fully embrace this smart city bullshit, wherever the they're talking about, living in pods, whatever, Death Stranding, fully embrace that OnlyFans will disappear. All that DJ will disappear, right? It's the opposite culprit that's responsible for degeneracy. It's the opposite of what you think. It's not because of technology. We have to learn from Nick Land's accelerationism. The problem with Amazon isn't that it's too big and it's too technologically transformative. Oh, let's go back to the past. Let's go back to... No, we're not going back to the past. We're going to seize the Amazon means of production and we're going to go forward. You want to end this furry... that's what furries are. And that's just the biggest example of degeneracy, by the way. But they're trying to preserve something that's destroyed and dead. Let's accept this future with our sober senses and let's welcome the wisdom of the past when it authentically discloses itself to us. But let's not artificially worship and artificially idealize the past. Remember the lesson from Marx. We have to go through this process, and only when we go through the process are we going to be able to authentically arrive at the true essence of the past. You understand? So we have both. We got to have both that cutting edge and a respect and veneration for the wisdom of the past. That's not based on idealized images, but is based on something concrete and human. You understand? Being able to embrace the alienation of the internet as the ground of new freedom, that's how you destroy the evil. That's how you destroy the degen. You know? What is more... Let me tell you this. The dude who's on Discord, oh, Discord kitten, watch anime with me. That's a dude who's taking something beautiful and it up with their sweaty, musty ass. And I'm saying, why don't we embrace that shiny cutting edge instead? You know what I mean? Why don't we embrace that shining cutting edge instead? And I'm not saying it in an avant-garde sense, right? I'm just saying it in a sense of there's a future ahead of us, and instead of running away from it, we should be at the forefront of it. We should be embracing it. We should be at the forefront. Okay, it's way more legible now. Anyway, so Newsweek actually did an article on Dark MAGA. They actually wrote an article about it. And yeah, it's way better. So anyway, Dark MAGA is a post-alt-right aesthetic that promotes an authoritarian version of Trump in dystopian Terminator-like images. Yeah, I mean, like, Dark MAGA is not even like a fraction of the sick, demonic, evil that's coming out of the left, and which is coming out of the progressive left and the Biden left. And we all know that. We all know these are evil, sick, disgusting, demonic people. And you know what Dark MAGA really is at the end of the day? Dark MAGA is just going to be amounting to a reflection of that, right? Dark MAGA is, there's almost something redemptive about Dark MAGA because it's like a way of like, it's a way of avenging that. That's what it looks evil because it's avenging the evil that has been inflicted on us by these sick, disgusting leftists. And, I know I sound like Tucker Carlson saying that. I'm personally victim of it, right? These are sick people. They drag your name through the mud. They make up about you. They call you a Nazi. They project all of the sickness and evil that alt-righters can't even dream of adopting, ironically. They project all of it on you. All of that evil, sick, twisted comes from them, right? It almost all comes from them. It's like somehow a lot of people don't understand that, but it does, right? So we got this journalist who's like, oh my God, Dark MAGA, so scary. Oh my God. They're like soying out about how scary they find Dark MAGA. And then here's the best part. This is like the creme de la crop of this entire situation, right? While you have these journalists fear-mongering about Dark MAGA, okay, in the same breath, at the same time they're fear-mongering about Dark MAGA, okay, you've also got these same journalists supporting the Azov Nazis in Ukraine who are like crucifying people and literally doing very, very dark like locking the elderly in a concrete basement forever just so they're like trying to tally up casualties of Russian attacks that they can blame Russia on. It's actually crazy, right? I mean, you're fear-mongering about Dark MAGA. I mean, you're already supporting some pretty dark. Chairman Gonzalo was up. Those people killed babies. They are super. They boiled babies. They're psychotic scum, and he rotted in prison and he just rot in hell, burn in hell. Right? That's my words for Chairman Gonzalo. I'm talking about a system, guys. I'm not talking about anyone who happens to be... I'm not talking about a crazy mad scientist who was an academic who was like, well, I'm just going to boil babies today. That's what Gonzalo was. That he was like a crazy guy and he lost his mind. Right? And there's really got to be a reason why so many people are kind of out here like, isn't that bad empanada guy? That he's super anti-Russia, super anti-China, anti-North Korea, supports American imperialism on everywhere in the world except Latin America. Also, I'll admit another thing too. It's not just Latin America, it's also the Palestine leftists, right? And before you what are you, a Zionist? I am a Lebanese dude, Shia background, South Lebanon background. Who do you think I like? Okay, these Western leftists who've got that's why you got a Palestine-Ukraine flag emoji going on. Sounds like the Palestine movement has been co-opted in the West. And here's what's interesting. The Palestine movement has gone mainstream in the West exactly at the moment that, internally speaking, the Palestinian movement became hopeless. Okay? It became totally hopeless. As soon as the Israelis had total control, with absolutely no hope for a non-geopolitical solution to the issue, that's when it started to happen. So, let me tell you, you talk about Palestine, you're full of but start talking about Iran, start talking about Syria, start talking about something going on in South Lebanon. Hell, even start talking about neo-Ottomanism, I don't care. But when you zoom out and start to have a geopolitical perspective where you're like, it's not just about Palestine, it's about the whole region, and that's what's at stake. That's when I'll take you seriously. But when you're just like, look, Palestine by itself, the Israelis already, they have pretty much full control, right? Gaza is holding out. Why is Gaza holding out? Because of Syria and Iran. That's why. Okay? So you got to have a bigger geopolitical picture of what's going on. Otherwise, you're full of shit. So all these fucking lefties and liberals who are waving that Palestinian flag and you're full of shit, okay? Because you're only doing that because why weren't you doing that in the 90s? Why weren't you doing that in the 80s? Let me tell you this. Why wasn't the left waving the Palestinian flag before the 6-Day War? Because before the 6-Day War, there was a pretty strong chance that the Arabs were going to win. Or at least they didn't know if there was. Once it became clear that Israel was stronger than them, all of a sudden it became fashionable to support Palestine. And that's literally the origin of the whole thing. They only support the Palestinians because they see them as eternal victims. That's why they'll claim to support the Palestinians, but when it comes to the geopolitical situation with Syria and Iran, and hell, maybe even Turkey if you want, right? I'm not a, sectarian. They won't say a word, right? And that's how you know they're full of shit. We see the value in religion and stuff. I do. But I live in this world. In this world, my authority is Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot. I'm just kidding. Not that one. That's literally a joke. I'm literally joking. That is not. He's not one of the heads. Pol Pot is not one of the heads. Okay? Not one of the heads. Just a joke. Just a joke. Not one of the heads. Okay? But, those are the heads as far as I see. Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao. No, Fidel Castro is not a head. I'm sorry. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And that's a big problem. It's like a big problem that people think that way, okay? Thank you, Julius.
I can't
Western leftists. It's like, don't assume because someone is virtuous that they're one of the heads. Don't sit here and Fidel Castro's a head of one of the heads. No, he's not. I'm a Castroist. What the does that mean? Fidel Castro was a great man, did great things, and he was like an exemplary, virtuous communist. But that doesn't mean his contribution to theory.
How could you forget Chairman Gonzalo?
Thank you, Wake Me Up. It doesn't, it's like when people are like, it's like, it reminds me of when people do when they're like, Angela Davis is one of the heads of Marxism. No, she's not. Get the out of here with that. That's the dumbest I've ever heard. You just virtues. Or when people are like, Rosa Luxemburg is one of the heads. I'm a Luxemburgist. No, you're not. You're a desperate virtue signaling. I'm actually a Luxemburgist. And I want you to, I want you to know that women can be heads of Marxism as well. I'm a Oh yeah, she's a woman. I'm a Luxemburgist. I have that in my profile. I have that in my description. I'm a Luxemburgist. Oh, you don't know Rosa Luxemburg? You don't know about Rosa? Get out of here, dude. Get the out of here, You just go ahead and tell me. Why? Because she disagreed with Lenin about the national question? That doesn't make her her own head. It just places her in the proximity of... She was a virtuous Orthodox Marxist. Rosa Luxemburg was a virtuous Orthodox Marxist. That's all she was. She never made the step that Lenin did of something new. She was just a pretty consistent, non-opportunist, non-traitor Orthodox Marxist. Because Kautsky and the rest of them were traitors. So Rosa Luxemburg was just an Orthodox Marxism who did it. She didn't sell out. She's just an Orthodox Marxist who did not sell out. She was a faithful student of a very, Orthodox interpretation of Marx and Engels, and that's it.
Bela Kun, one of the heads confirmed.
And no, Bela Kun is not one of the heads. I mean, even Stalin isn't really one of the heads, and that's a really hard one to figure out. Is he one of them? I don't know. But he's kind of not. He's just kind of was a faithful student of Lenin. I mean, Lenin, I really don't even think we've fully exhausted the implications of what Lenin did for Marxism. I've always said that from the very beginning. We haven't even fully even the word Marxism, Leninism is kind of makeshift. It's okay, Marx, Engels, then Lenin, plus Lenin. And I really agree with this plus. I really think Lenin should be a new way of reading Marx. We should change. I'm Muslim. Marxism, guys, you want to know the secret? Can I just tell you the theological secret of this? Marxism, Leninism is just Christianity. That's all it is. Three heads, it's the Trinity. Marx, Engels, Lenin, it's the Trinity. It's literally a Trinity, right? And it's just Christianity. It's literally Christianity. That's all it is. Okay? So let me put it this way. Thank you, VRO. Can I explain this to you? Thank you, VRO. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. So,
thoughts on Tito?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Tito, okay? And not everyone's going to agree with me, and that's okay. I'm just going to give you my opinion. But, classical Marxists who reject Lenin, it's like Judaism, right? And then Marxism, Leninism, and then Orthodox Marxism is in between Judaism and Christianity. It's like Gnosticism and all that, those weird early movements. Then Lenin, that's Christianity, right? And then me, I'm coming from a Muslim thing. Not just because I have a Muslim background, because it's that's what I want to return to the monotheism of Marxism. That's my thing, right? For me, it's like I don't want to return to a pre-Leninist Marxism. I want to return to reinterpreting Marx after Lenin. That's my whole thing. Reinterpreting Marx after Lenin. But I'm still a Marxist-Leninist, aka I'm still a Christian in a way, right? Because we haven't made that step, right? We never may make that step in my whole lifetime, right? My whole lifetime, that step. But I'm just something it's always I think about, right? Okay, Tito, y'all are not going to like this. I am against Tito, okay? Tito, what he did, his betrayal of Stalin was cringe. It was cringe as okay? That betrayal of Stalin, I don't forgive it. I can't forgive it, okay? And then, I don't know, Titoism, it's just cringe, right? It's just cringe. And, there's a civil war in my Discord between the Hoxha faction and the Tito faction, right? And I'm going to be a neutral guy here because I'm going to say both sides were bad, okay? So Tito was unprincipled and was an opportunist and kind of sold out to the West, right? He had no independent geopolitical orientation to speak of, and it was cringe geopolitically, right? And then Hoxha, it's kind of like he was, first of all, brilliant, probably one of the smartest living world thinkers of any state ever, right? Definitely one of the most well-read and knowledgeable, right? But Hoxha was also dogmatic, right? So there's that. Because, I'm a Maoist. I think throughout that whole dispute, Mao was the one who was correct, right? Because what Mao did is he critiqued Stalin in the right ways, and he preserved Stalin, and then he added to it, right? But Hoxha said, so Mao said Stalin was 70% right, but then you have you have Hoxha out here, and Hoxha's just like, nope, Stalin is 100% right. He's not even 0% wrong, right? And I'm being hyperbolic, but it's like, I don't agree with that. I don't think Stalin... Oh, okay, I kind of agree with Hoxha that Stalin was 100% right, but there was a problem that emerged under Stalin's reign, which was the Soviet bureaucracy. There was a problem. And you know what proof of that was? Mao's critique of Stalin was vindicated by Khrushchev's betrayal. Because after all, how did Khrushchev get to power? How did Khrushchev stay in power? It was all under Stalin. This was Stalin's system, right? Those same people betrayed him. So Mao critiques Stalin because he's a Stalinist. That's the same way I do it, right? His biggest enemy was the bureaucracy. You're right. But Stalin was not he wasn't good enough in being able to outmaneuver that bureaucracy, and that's a big problem. That's the biggest problem, right? He kind of lost to the bureaucracy. And we're always being told that, why is Russia taking so long in Ukraine? They must be really getting BTFO'd in Ukraine. Now, I'm going to admit something, right? This is something that, they always like to gloat in my face. Destiny always likes to gloat it in my face. But it's genuinely why I haven't really been covering Russia all that much anymore, is because, I kind of became convinced that it's hard to really know anything about what's going on the ground in Russia. And I was drawing some pretty big conclusions based on what little information was being offered to me that I don't think was justified. I don't think me saying that, Russia is not going to, Russia's going to take Kiev soon. They're probably going to take it soon. Russia is probably not going to be there for that long. These were all things I was just assuming, not because it's what the Russians were saying, because it's what, I was just deducing and I was just intuitively saying. And clearly I didn't have an adequate enough understanding, right? Clearly I didn't have an adequate enough understanding of the situation there. So I've kind of been holding off, but I am going to report to you that Russia is now talking about phase 2 of its operation in Ukraine. Now, a lot of people were saying that, oh, Russia said phase 1 because they were coping because they couldn't take Kiev. But if you actually look at how the operation was being distributed across Russia. Thank you, Saket. Appreciate you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. So you got to understand, throughout the duration of this conflict, it's been about one thing and one thing only. It has not been about taking Kiev. That's not what the Russians were saying. It wasn't about taking all of Ukraine. It was specifically about the Donbass. It was about the Donbass, Donetsk, and Lugansk. That's what this operation has been about the whole time. Since day one, since the very beginning. They haven't changed their position and their line on that. So it's really disappointing for a lot of people to assume otherwise. Oh, because Russia didn't take Kiev, the operation failed. Well, the whole point of the operation was securing Donetsk, Lugansk, and maybe some other parts of eastern Ukraine, maybe Odessa, maybe connecting to Transnistria. I don't know. We don't know, right? So, as of now, the talk of the glorious victories of the Ukrainian military has, been put to a standstill, and now what they're starting to talk about is the fact that Russian brutality, unprecedented in Ukraine, because they've started another phase of their operation, right? And let's see. So this is what CBS is saying. So in recent weeks, after its attempt to storm Kiev failed, so again, I'm covering this because I want you guys to know this is a common narrative you're going to be hearing about the conflict. There has never been any express intention by the Russian government or the Russian military to take or storm Kiev. Russian troop movements never justified the conclusion that they were trying to storm Kiev, and the scope and scale of the military operation also didn't justify the accusation that Russia was trying to storm Kiev. The Western media made up a bunch of like how there's this Russian convoy that's 40 miles long on its way to Kiev, and it was completely made up. So there is nothing to begin with that justifies the claim that there was ever an attempt to storm Kiev. That this is what they said right in the beginning of the conflict. The main goal was about Donbass. Many of us were confused about why there was Russian troop movements in northern and even more western parts of Ukraine, especially northern parts of Ukraine and around Kiev. And what the Russians were saying, okay, we're here for the Donbass. And when I remember the breaking news of like when there was bombs in Kiev, and truth be told, I didn't even believe the news. I was like, this is clearly made up. Russia's not bombing Kiev. It's just for the Donbass and it's just for Donetsk. I was wrong, right? Russia was bombing Kiev. Russia was bombing all over Ukraine. But later it became clear and it was revealed, right, that the reason this was happening was because Russia eliminating military infrastructure and military targets across all of Ukraine, as well as preventing the Ukrainian armed forces from being able to replenish themselves while the bulk of the actual fighting is going on in the Donbass or Novorossiya more generally. So phase 1 was about targeting military infrastructure across all of Ukraine. Phase 2 is going to be more focused, even though the bulk of the fighting was already focused on the Donbass. Phase 2 is actually going to focus a little more on the Donbass, right? So after withdrawing from the capital, Russia began regrouping and reinforcing its ground troops in the east for an all-out offensive. Okay, but it's pretty okay to be clear. What Russia was doing in the capital was preventing Ukrainian forces from being replenished, distracting Ukrainian forces from the Donbass, and eliminating military infrastructure. That's what the Russians have been saying from day one. And they're trying to say that, oh, they've just revised their goals and it's just, they're coping or so whatever the these people are saying. It's complete madness. It's wrong. the people of Crimea voting to join Russia is not the same as the people of Taiwan voting for independence. So if the people of Taiwan voted for independence, they would be breaking themselves off of a historically defined civilization state, China. It would be a form of separatism and secession, right? If the people of Crimea choose to join Russia, they are rejoining this historically defined civilization. So it's a completely opposite scenario. It's not true. We're not saying that just because of people vote to secede, that's what makes it just. You have to also understand that there's another difference here, which is that there was an illegal coup in Ukraine in 2014, and the people of Crimea voted for the Ukrainian president Yanukovych, okay? And he was illegally deposed. So all of Ukraine's sovereignty enshrined by its constitution ceased to have a valid claim over the entire territory of Ukraine. People did have a right to secede and leave because the whole constitutional order of the Ukrainian state, which is, by the way, the only basis of a Ukrainian sovereign state. There is no historical country called Ukraine. There's no historical nation called Ukraine. It's completely artificial, as you should know. Lenin invented the state of... Lenin is the one who invented the state of Ukraine. So it's only the constitutional order that was overthrown in the 2014 coup that justified the existence of Ukraine as a country. And when that was overthrown, you know, it's very much just for people in Crimea or Russians in eastern Ukraine to decide they no longer want to be part of this artificial experimental state that wasn't based on historically defined boundaries, but an artificial constitutional order.
Wait, so you mean the Russia can just take the whole Ukraine, like, if they can, like that?
They can't act against the will of the majority of the people because it's not sustainable. But otherwise, yeah, I think, yes, it would be justified. I don't believe in a Ukrainian state or a Ukrainian nation. Absolutely not. It's just an issue of the fact that in Western Ukraine, they don't want to be living under Russia, so that can't be forced upon them. But if you took that out of the equation, I mean, there's not a lot of historical basis for a Ukrainian state.
Well, the only thing I can say is I don't agree with that. I think it's just basically the same what the American did. Like, it's just imperialism.
No, it's not imperialism because
it's not Soviet Union. It's imperialism, like Russian Empire.
No, it's not imperialism because
history,
Ukraine.
That's how we
Ukraine
Russia.
Owes its existence as a nation to Lenin and Lenin alone. So without the Soviet Union, there would be no Ukraine. Can you imagine if China was broken up into 1,000 pieces and all of these new states were now recognized in the international world? I mean, don't you think it would be just...
Yep, I have imagined that things too. Like, it's a small possibility. It has a small possibility.
Yeah, I know.
I agree with that.
I know, but I think it would be just if Chinese patriots would want to unite the whole of China into one state, as it has been rightfully throughout history. Right? And even if that violated international norms, it would still be just. International norms be damned, right? China is a historical civilization state that is worth defending and worth preserving, whether or not the world agrees China should exist or not. Now, all the Russians are doing is saying the same when it comes to Russia.
China